Resuming debate, the honourable member for Saskatoon Greenwood. Grasswood, sorry.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. You know, I was a young teenager when the War Measures Act in 1970 gripped the country for many days. I know I don't look that old, but I remember that back in 1970. In fact, I remember watching the event on television, fearful for my country. Madam Speaker, 52 years later, under a new act, 37 million Canadians, I find, in this country are more divided than ever. Our country is in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. 1988.
May I interrupt? Est-ce que je peux demander aux honorables...
May I ask the honourable members to please not make so much noise when their colleagues are speaking? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. 1988, under the Conservatives, Parliament debated for months the new Emergency Act, and up until this week, it was never used. The question on everyone's mind in the House is, should the current government have invoked the Emergencies Act? We've asked the government for weeks, what were they doing to defuse the convoy? Many MPs from the opposition side had dialogue with the protesters. In fact, I was one. I listened to a number of Saskatchewan drivers who made their way to the nation's capital. That is my job, Madam Speaker. That is my job as a member of Parliament, to listen. Listen to other views that, at times, we may not agree with. And that is the tough part of this job. But we have to listen. And I kind of found it surprising today, a number of parliamentary secretaries from the government side actually admitted they too were on the street talking with their constituents. And that is a shock, because the government never admitted that until today. While it is true that there were many different views being represented in this city, it is entirely unfair to categorize all protesters as fringe extremists. This was our Prime Minister's first reaction in the House. He has a pattern of saying divisive and derogatory things when he is faced with major issues that he's not equipped to handle. We saw a prime example of this just last week when the Prime Minister hurled a very disgraceful insult at my friend and our colleague, the member from Thornhill, a granddaughter of the Holocaust survivor, accusing her of supporting a profoundly immoral ideology, the same evil ideology that he claimed millions of innocent Jews during the Holocaust. He still today has not apologized. Shameful for the leader of this country. But with regard to the current debate surrounding the Emergencies Act, I don't believe the Prime Minister has met the key thresholds outlined to invoke this act. But we have seen in the last 23 days or so, it lies at the feet, I think, of the Prime Minister and his cabinet. This government has totally mismanaged this situation. It could have, like the blockades in Coutts, Alberta, even Emerson, Manitoba, Surrey, BC, and the Ambassador Bridge in Windsor, have ended without the need of the Emergencies Act. All 4 or 5 of those incidents that I just spoke about actually did not need the Emergency Act. The protest happened, and it was quietly, they did away with it. Why did this Prime Minister then go from 0 to 100% without any action or even any dialogue? The key to conflict in this House, the key to conflict resolution is to work with people. We all know that. We try desperately on each side to work with people. But using derogatory and divisive language only fans the flames of disagreement, which we certainly saw in the last 23 days. We are all aware that there were some people protesting here in the city with abhorrent racist views. And let me be crystal clear, I condemn the behavior and all those views without any reservation. Let's make no mistake, Madam Speaker, the events of the last month and the government's mishandling of them will go down, I think, in history as one of the darkest times in this country. Lots has been said in this House about the foreign money coming into this country with the convoy. GoFundMe froze the funds. They returned some to the donors. And then we had GiveSendGo's website. Well, it was mysteriously hacked, revealing the names and email addresses of those who contributed to the protests. Now, I can tell you many Canadians, 48% Canadians, donated to this cause. We know Canadians coast to coast to coast have donated $5, $10, $20, $50 or more. In fact, in my province of Saskatchewan, over 1,300 people contributed to the convoy. 1,300 people. 72% of those donations out of my province were under $100 or less. So we're talking $10, $20, $50, and so on. And I've talked with people who donated and now are very worried that their bank accounts will be frozen. This is just a terrifying situation for many innocent people who have made modest donations to a cause that they supported. The potential for this to severely damage their personal and even business finances is extremely distressing, and it should be for all Canadians. Canadians should not have to worry that their finances are in danger of ruin by the government because they supported this protest. And yes, I do understand that there's, again, extreme cases where this becomes a factor. But in this situation, the government is being heavy-handed, they're being punitive, and trying to control by fear. I have received dozens of emails on this matter. And Madam Speaker, I'm just going to give you three because I've received a pile like this over the last 3 days. Thursday, I get an email from a woman in my riding saying she donated to the convoy. She is now scared that her bank account will be frozen. Do you know the next day she went down to the bank and withdrew a sizable amount of money? Think about that. The next day, Friday morning, she's down at the TD Bank saying, I want to withdraw most of my money. A senior in my riding is most disturbed. The government is targeting of individual bank accounts. And then there's another email saying freezing Canadians' personal or business bank accounts without court order or consequence is totally unacceptable and should have Canadians very worried. I know I am. And we all should be very concerned about this. Another troubling aspect of invoking this act is there will be already tools at the disposal of law enforcement to deal with this unlawful protest. The Liberal Justice Minister claimed it was necessary to invoke the Emergency Act in order to compel tow truck operators to remove illegally parked vehicles. However, in Section 129B of the Criminal Code, it does give police the option to require anyone without reasonable excuse, quote, to assist a public officer or peace officer in the execution of his duty in arresting a person or in preserving the peace. I and my Conservative colleagues oppose invoking the Measure Act. It is a clear case of simply a government overreach. The Act is supposed to be used for emergency situations that cannot be addressed through existing laws. The government has failed to explain why precisely this Act needed to be invoked at this time. In fact, the following organizations have come out publicly against this Liberal overreach: the World Sikh Organization, the BC Civil Liberties Association, Canadian Constitution Federation. This is in addition to the opposition of 7 provincial governments. And as you know, governments in the different provinces all have the powers that they need to deal with blockades and street protests. This is a totally dangerous precedent that cannot be easily undone. The Conservative Party has spoken again and again in favor of dialogue and discussion, but this Prime Minister has repeatedly refused. He has chosen instead to divide and insult Canadians. Canadians agree that law and order must be maintained, but the Emergency Act, the successor of the War Measures Act, is not a way to do it. Madam Speaker, I cannot, in good conscience, support giving unlimited and unchecked power to a Liberal Prime Minister who has repeatedly demonstrated lack of good judgment here in the House of Commons. My constituents have spoken loud and clear. They demand better leadership than we currently have in this country. Thank you.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and to my friend opposite, who I have a great deal of respect for, and we've worked well together over the years. I do want to give him some startling numbers. I know he cited some numbers. With respect to the fundraising, some 52% of the funds came from the U.S. 1,100 of those names relate to the same donors that donated to the January 6th insurrection at Capitol Hill last year. Does it not worry him that the level of hatred that we've seen, and it's not an isolated one or two or three people, this has been a number of different people with a number of different symbols, as well as expressions of hate, without others denouncing them, particularly the leadership denouncing this hatred? Does it not worry him that we're going in the wrong direction, and the support of these blockades really sends a wrong signal in terms of law enforcement, in terms of having a safe country for all?
Member for Saskatoon Grasswood.
Madam Speaker, I want to thank the Secretary Minister of Justice. It's interesting how this government gets around looking at bank accounts. I remember in 2015, Leeds Now cost Joan Crockett her MP seat in the city of Calgary. Thousands of dollars from Lead Now from outside this country went into the Calgary riding and cost Joan Crockett the seat. 4 years later, we won it back. And what about the Tides Foundation in this country? Exactly. Can we look at their books, Madam Speaker? They have done reputable damage in Western Canada with all the money coming in from the United States and throughout the world. Those are two great examples to refute what the Secretary Minister of Justice just mentioned about people in this country worried about this situation.
Questions et commentaires, questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Vancouver Centre. Vancouver East. The Honourable Member for Vancouver East.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the member for his comments. He cited a lot of people in his speech, but I wonder what the member thinks about the comments from the former Conservative MP Peter MacKay and Senator Vern White, who said, and I quote, "What we have seen in the occupation of Ottawa and blockages at border crossings is not the right of protest enshrined in our Constitution, but illegal activity that represents a national security and economic threat to Canada. Leaving aside the stated manifesto of the organizers to overthrow the government, these protests are weakening our economy and disrupting the freedoms of law-abiding citizens," end quote. As we have seen, many citizens, particularly in downtown Ottawa, were not able to leave their homes and they felt unsafe. They were harassed. They were shouted at. What is the member's comments to those law-abiding citizens? And does he think that his former colleague, the former MP Peter MacKay, and the current Senator Vern White are wrong?
Honourable Member for Saskatoon Grasswood.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. To the member of Vancouver East, I wonder about the great Tommy Douglas. What would he think about her party here today? Because Tommy Douglas supported the 1970 War Measures Act. How about Swen Robinson from her province of BC? I remember him. Tweeting out, he can't believe what the NDP stand for today. You know why? Because they stand for nothing, Madam Speaker. We know that. They don't stand for Canadians. And what about Aaron Weir, former Saskatchewan MP? By the way, we have no more NDP MPs in our province for 2 elections in a row. Why? Because citizens of Saskatchewan have seen through that party.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Saanich-Gull-Files.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To my honourable colleague from Grassroots, I think we've seen something called a war room in the Alberta government, and a very expensive report that tried to look into and did look into all the foundation money that ever went into Alberta, didn't find any evidence of anything other than it was all reported, it was never hidden, and as far as Lead Now, as far as I know, all their donors are Canadian. So I think we've already put to bed the rumors. If you want to find foreign-funded large influence on energy policy in Alberta, look no farther than the board of directors of the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers. 80% of them controlled by foreign interests.
Member for Saskatoon Grasswood.
Thanks to the member of Saanich Gulf Island. I will say this, because I've watched for the last 2 days quite a bit of the debate, and she has not made up her mind on this. And I believe her, actually, and we're looking forward to where her vote goes tomorrow night. But you know, Western Canada, they're looking at every NDP and Green MP to see where they will vote tomorrow night, and they will not forget, Madam Speaker.
Resuming debate. Reprise du